Hi, I'm Brian McLachlan and this is Deep Thought Balloon, little videos about comic stories, pop culture, and other stuff. Let's talk about how to draw crowd scenes. I'm going to illustrate my point with mostly Darwyn Cooke's work because he was the one who taught me most of this. He's the cartoonist behind The New Frontier, Catwoman's redesign, the Parker adaptations, and more. I was lucky enough to live in Toronto when Dar was here and he would have lunch on New Comic Book Day with a bunch of us cartoonists. We called it Superman lunch, and when Dar moved away to Halifax, we called it Jimmy Olsen lunch because the Superman had left. Luckily, before he left us all, he imparted a lot of knowledge to us. Rest in peace, buddy. A lot of people, when they think of a crowd scene, picture a Where's Waldo style image, where you have a bird's eye view of all the characters, maybe isometric, to let the audience clearly see each individual in the crowd. The closest I've seen in Darwyn's work is this magazine cover. Other than Spidey, the rest of the characters are the same size, same perspective. He put the most iconic characters that would sell a magazine at the center: Batman, Wonder Woman, Superman, and his Catwoman. Yes, sometimes including or highlighting characters is a monetary decision because you want people to pick up the book or sell the original art to fans of those characters later. Darwyn appreciated that he got to draw a lot of characters he grew up reading and to contribute to their legacies, but he also knew that working on these characters would let him move on to other projects and that he could bring a bunch of those characters' fans with him. It's a good lesson. Enjoy embracing the IP of a corporation that you are nostalgic for, but have an exit plan so you don't get taken advantage of. There's a reason he started working for Marvel and then dropped them like a hot potato and never went back. But back to this Waldo-like image. When doing this kind of work, it's important to plan and keep stepping back and looking at the whole thing as you build it, to see where you're moving people's eyes. It is a lot of work. If you're working digitally, drop in a few marks of color on a different layer to identify large patches. Check how color moves your eye around the piece so you don't end up getting to the coloring stage and find out you've bunched a lot of your green characters or objects in one place. Notice how Green Arrow and Lantern are back to back, but there's a space before the green dupe above them. And the green leaves from Poison Ivy in the top left, Sergeant Rock's green helmet in the bottom left, and Martian Manhunter peeking on the upper right help spread the green and move your eye around the page. In these group shots, you can see how Darwyn uses different sized characters to break up the crowd. Whether they're physically bigger like Bane and Clayface, or closer to the viewer like the Spirit and Ellen, it makes for a more interesting composition. For Darwyn, a group shot was also a chance to showcase everyone's favorite character, including his. You can see on this Batman cover how he prefers to draw dangerous dames and men in suits. So for him, putting a monstrous Killer Croc in the far back behind Catwoman's head makes sense. This piece wouldn't feel as much like a Darwyn piece if he had been forced to make Killer Croc and Bane the central figures. Your choices make a crowd scene into your crowd scene. To enjoy drawing a crowd scene like this, you want to make sure that you have the time for it. Budget at least 3 times as much as you would for a regular comic page the same size. Darwyn and his inker pal J Bone worked traditionally with tools on paper. If you're going to draw that way, they both knew that you don't start a crowd scene or any other page with the most fun parts, like the character's face, unless you've already warmed up and are into the swing of things. Start inking with a background detail that people are most likely to skim over, and work toward the parts that your audience will really fixate on, in case you're a bit sloppy to start. But most of the time, Darwyn didn't do these types of crowd scenes because they don't serve the story. They were mostly for covers and posters. The challenge with drawing traditional crowd scenes are many. Creating a complex composition that leads the eye, creating different poses and expressions for those people. If the people are not in the same uniform, a group of identical robots or something like that, having a deep knowledge of fashion so the characters have a more varied and realistic breadth of clothing and hairstyle choices. Fitting them into the perspective grid. Trust me, if you're a writer who's writing for comics, use your crowd scenes judiciously. If you're an artist who's given a scene where there are lots of people in the crowd, there are ways to take shortcuts that actually make the story stronger. Let's look at a less successful and probably time-crunch solution from an infamous Marvel team-up annual, where the writer Frank Miller asked for Spider-Man and his friends to be chased by thousands of people screaming for their death, and instead the artist Herb Trimpe drew a giant Spider-Man looking back and narrating the scene. Like, you're asking me to draw what now? Granted, Miller's style is more about simplifying things, and he would go on to write an epic battle crowd for his 300 comic, although with all of them wearing the same uniform, so maybe it would have been easier for Miller to draw in this style than Trimpe in his more classic realism. The more realistic your comic, the harder it will be to draw everything, including crowd scenes. Darwyn could draw in a variety of styles, but chose a more cartoony approach, even for heavy emotional work, because he knew that a looser style would decrease how much time he drew, and also allow him to keep working at the same level when he got older, not needing to keep up hand-cramping, detail-oriented rendering into old age. It's a huge loss that he didn't get a chance to age into that plan. Anyway, let's look at other ways Darwyn has simplified his art, which makes drawing crowd scenes easier, so we don't have to draw just a big Spider-Man noggin at the last minute. When introducing a location in a jet-setting spy story, Darwyn opted for not crowds of people, but instead a few items in location, each separated by a panel border, making it a different moment in time. It forces us to focus our attention on the little details of the place, the smells, the colors, the flavors. While a movie maker would probably hire lots of extras or use CG alongside a crane or drone shot, comics often work better with these little snapshots. It's easier on the cartoonist, and takes advantage of the difference between the two mediums. Another way Darwyn saved time was by cutting out calculating perspective. He used to say, "Don't draw the floor if you don't have to." Now you'll find plenty of Dar's comics with the floor in it. What he was saying that figuring out your perspective on the floor is often a lot of pointless work, and it's usually not dramatic. If your POV looks slightly up at your characters, it makes them look more powerful, your heroes more heroic, your villains more threatening. A downshot makes your characters look powerless, small, like a pawn in a game, an action figure for a child to play with. In the Parker books, he would often use it to show Parker when he felt powerless to avoid the violence and death that permeated his world. Or in these covers, look how the spirit looks like he's in trouble on the left, where we're looking a bit down on him, and heroic on the right, where we look up at him. It's especially important to ground these moments at a lower eye level so that when you want to have a soaring moment of flying, it feels dynamic. Let's look at this sequence where Wonder Woman interrupts Batman and Superman's fight. The first panel is an upshot, showing her as powerful enough to stop these two superheroes from fisticuffs. The middle panel has them at eye level, all equals, having a conversation. The last panel's downshot shows the boys feeling chastised, small, maybe embarrassed about how they've been acting. Talking about putting Superman in prison like a pawn to be taken off the board, the dark shadows that hide the rest of the Batcave and save a lot of rendering, mirroring the dark backstory Wonder Woman assumes Batman must have. In fact, Darwyn used to say, "When in doubt, black it out," meaning, make the characters or objects into a silhouette. You could hide a troublesome drawing that way, but it's also useful not to draw too much attention to the crowd. Unlike a Where's Waldo puzzle, which wants you to look everywhere at once, most comic crowds are there to imply a large group but direct you to the important character or characters in the scene. Look at this Justice League image with the background blacked out. Why? It's simple, but by facing Martian Manhunter the opposite way, he's showing how the character is part of the team, but still feels the most like an outsider. Perhaps because unlike the alien Superman, he wasn't raised on Earth. Darwyn blacked out the background because it doesn't matter where this takes place. It's really taking place inside Manhunter's mind. He could be anywhere, the county fair or a war zone, and he'd still feel alone. The empty spaces help us focus on the important things, not get distracted. But it can also be done more subtly, like on this Jonah Hex page where he's blacked out characters, or cropped their heads out of the page, to show us that they aren't main characters that we're looking at. They're a faceless group threat, a mob, not a person. The shadows unite them. Black is a good color, but so is purple. Purple doesn't appear a lot in nature, so you can use it to unite a crowd without fighting with the green trees, blue skies, gray concrete, and most people's clothing choices. In this Teen Titans cover, you can also see how the people at the front of the stage have faces drawn, but quickly as it goes back, it changes into loose lines, spots, and dots. We don't have the ability to focus on thousands of people at once. To draw them all would be less realistic. There's no way the Teen Titans are making eye contact with most of those people. We're seeing what they see, or at least what one of their roadies sees. And if Darwyn wasn't blacking it out, he was blocking it out. By drawing something big in the foreground, you can avoid having to invent and render lots of small details. Here, with the taxidermy animal scene, we can focus on the panther, the duck in the tree branch, and the snarling, toothy mouth. And then Dar only has to draw a few other animal bits to imply a room full of trophies. And the wooden table, ceiling, and bookshelf sets us up to imagine the rest of the room full of wooden furniture. Probably one of those globes you can pop open and find a bar inside of it, right? We can fill in the details with our mind. Notice the silhouetted characters are a focus of the composition, but only after we've taken in the rest of the location first. And in the airplane, the ventriloquist and his puppet and the Riddler block most of the right of the plane. There's no real perspective on his seat like there is on Catwoman's side, where there's just enough to set the scene. Penguin, Croc, Harley, and the drink cart and the Riddler block off most of the rest of the plane. While I saw Darwyn buy plenty of old magazines from the 60s to research when working on New Frontier, he didn't want to have to slavishly render the back end of a plane that wasn't helping the story and making an interesting picture. The focus should be that Batman's rogue gallery are all together, not on the anatomy of a plane. Dar especially made great use of objects and characters in the extreme foreground during a wild fight scene. It helps to add chaos, movement, and emphasizes the setting. The motorcycle parts help emphasize the crash. Meanwhile, the peanuts on the table, the bottles, the cans, the chairs, they all help show that the rest of the scene takes place in a bar. We can tell the other panels I chose all come from a bar scene. Some get used as weapons. They let us know what's there and where we are and what might be a threat. Look at how placing characters flying at interesting angles through the air blocks the background while adding chaos to the scene. And see how it helps with the flash in this scene. In the first panel, you might not immediately see that we're in a casino. Those little stacks of chips are hard to notice, but when Flash whizzes by, the cards and chips become hard to ignore, and we see for sure that this is a place for gambling and not just a space-themed restaurant. The Flash is going to have to gamble with people's lives in a minute, the setting emphasizing the drama. And while this page isn't a crowd, but a bunch of different people in different places, Darwyn's work can encourage you to think of a more graphic way to draw a crowd scene. An aerial map with significant crowd members' heads could be a fresh way to do a crowd scene. I love the shot of a gambler from Selena's Big Score looking up from the craps table, where we don't need to see how the dice land, we get to see the characters' reactions instead. It's way more dramatic to keep the POV low looking up, while drawing those huge dice blocks out a lot of time-consuming drawing. I could go on forever gushing over his work, but I should get to the point. Let's look at how Darwyn applies these storytelling shortcuts to a big crowd scene double-page spread. In this scene from The New Frontier, Wildcat is in a boxing match. The up-tilted POV makes us feel like we are in the crowd. Isn't that more powerful than a Where's Waldo? When you're on the floor of a sporting event or concert, your sight lines aren't created to see the crowd in detail. They're there to avoid seeing the crowd so you can focus on the entertainment. You may have to try to see over the people around you if they're taller. You might feel cramped. The crowd here does that. They're blocking it out too, taking over the bottom third of the page with a few large figures. They're all great storytelling bits too. The woman looking away reminds us of the savagery of the match, the pain of it, while the raised arm celebrates the excitement. It's an interesting contradiction. Is this battle worth it? The reporters with cameras seem to think so. This is a newsworthy moment. This is echoed by the upturned POV, where even though Wildcat is getting beat up, we still see him as a hero, one of two titans battling it out. Because we see his face clearly and the other boxer is covering his, that helps us focus on Wildcat. Plus, he's mostly in the center with the lines framing him. Like the Teen Titans cover, if you look at the first few rows on the other side of the ring, you'll see Darwyn spent time rendering those characters in some detail, but then quickly changes to spots and dots. A little attention goes a long way to letting you get away with simple shapes. And he's even using silhouettes in the very back. Looking up at the stairs makes them easier to draw too, one line for each step instead of two. And the top third is some simple perspective as well, with the bonus of not having to draw anyone in that perspective. Drawing the ceiling or sky is almost always easier than the floor, and yet it all works to make a more powerful moment in a busier crowd. We have a space of calm up there, so it doesn't feel so busy like a Where's Waldo. It helps us know where to focus in the composition. You'll see Dar use these same sort of techniques in other crowd scenes that feel crowded in the right places. Hopefully you can apply these shortcuts and know how to draw crowd scenes both more efficiently and effectively, because there will be crowd scenes where you need to draw a bunch of different characters to be effective, and you'll want to save your energy and attention for those. Look at how Darwyn is using composition to lead your eye around like a classical painting. Check for eye lines. Where are characters pointing? What direction are the lines leading you? Thanks to Darwyn for all the knowledge he imparted. I really miss our Superman. He had so much more to give us. Now go out and check out The New Frontier or one of his other works for a masterclass in storytelling. Good luck and keep thinking deep thought balloons.